Hi guys, I just watched Hellboy the Crooked Man, and I know I'm a little bit late to the party, but I'd heard it was an awful film, and it kind of put me off watching it. So I was waiting for it to come to streaming, and it finally hit Amazon Prime, so I watched it for the very first time tonight. And yeah, I've got a few things to say about it. So yeah, this Hellboy movie wasn't the best. I think the best Hellboy movies are probably Hellboy 1 and 2 with Ron Perlman, and I think a lot of people think the same way. Now, at first, this Hellboy movie was a kind of a disappointment, but I must say, as the movie progressed, I kind of started to appreciate the effort that went into making this movie on a $20 million budget. The Crooked Man opens with Hellboy and his partner Bobby Joe Song travelling in a train car escorting a supernatural spider who is awakened by something dark in the region and attacks, causing the train car to fly off the tracks, leaving Hellboy and his partner stranded in a remote Appalachian community run by witches and the evil Crooked Man. Okay, so the main problem I had with this movie is that it didn't feel like a movie. It felt more like a fan film that someone might have uploaded to YouTube. Or maybe, I don't know, like a TV series from the 90s. That was the kind of vibes that I was getting from this movie at first. Also, at first the casting choice for Hellboy made me feel a little underwhelmed. Kind of like how I felt when Peter Weller was replaced by Robert John Burke in RoboCop 3. I know that's a strange comparison, but that's how this movie made me feel. This new Hellboy was just not doing it for me. I felt there was just too many F-bombs dropped by him, and the amount of times he pointed his gun at the camera was starting to annoy me a little bit. Like, the same shot over and over again. And at first I thought his overall performance was kind of dull, but bear with me, because he kind of grew on me. And then there's the CGI, which isn't always bad, but the CGI spider at the beginning of the movie was god awful. Not for 1 minute did I believe that that spider was actually there in the same shot as Hellboy. Like, the two just seemed really disconnected, and it seemed more like a CGI creature from maybe 1999 rather than 2024. And then there's Jefferson White, who plays Tom Farrell, and you may recognise him from Yellowstone. He plays Jimmy in that, and he's actually a really good character in Yellowstone. I like him a lot. And in this, he is kind of pushing the story along. He drives the story along by giving us some backstory to what is actually going on in this creepy village before we actually arrived as the viewer. And his performance is pretty good, yeah, it's pretty solid. I have no complaints there. As this movie progressed, I started to notice that this movie was trying its best to be as faithful to the comic books as possible, and this movie is actually an adaptation of 3 separate comic books by Mike Mignola, and I've got to admit they were kind of succeeding. It did feel like a story from the comics, and the overall feel and atmosphere felt directly from the pages of the Hellboy books. That is actually something that I had always wanted them to attempt when making a Hellboy movie. And I've got to say, as much as I did love the Ron Perlman movies, and believe me, I do love those movies I felt dealt more in fantasy horror, whereas in The Crooked Man, there was a straight up supernatural horror, with witches, demons, and even zombies. And even when the movie started, the title of the movie flashed up on the screen in red letters, which reminded me a lot of the old Hammer horror movies, which in my opinion is very cool, and a very cool way to start the movie. It was something completely different. And the movie even ended with the same title card, what splashed up onto the screen in red letters. What, like I said, really reminded me of the Hammer House horror movies. I've got to admit, as I carried on watching this movie, I started to change my opinion on what I thought was originally a bad movie. Kind of. It still did not feel quite right, but it was eerie, it was creepy, and it was atmospheric. And the makeup on the Crooked Man was very disturbing, and the way he moved and snapped his neck was very effective. I loved all of that. Also, I started to think that even Hellboy was actually being played right. You'll have to forgive me, I forget the actor's name who played Hellboy, but I started to believe that he was actually doing quite a good job, because in the comics Hellboy is a very somber and quiet and observant character, and I feel that's the version of Hellboy that we get in this movie. He's not always cracking jokes or acting like a child, he's more like the comic version, and as the movie progressed I started to appreciate that. But by the time we reached the second half of this movie, I once again started to drift off. It wasn't holding my attention as much. The middle of the movie was definitely the best part, with the characters taking refuge in a church as witches, the Crooked Man, and even zombies attack, and it was very, very cool and really creepy. If this was a TV episode, that would have been the perfect place to end the story, to end the episode. Unfortunately, the movie carried on a little too long for me and destroyed what flow it found somewhere in the first hour. By the end of the movie, I no longer hated it. I thought it was actually a very impressive attempt at bringing the comic book atmosphere to the movie. Even if it didn't quite feel right, it was a good attempt, especially with such a small budget. I actually went into this movie fully expecting to hate it, and like I said, at first I did, and it started to grow on me. So even though this movie didn't quite deliver a perfect Hellboy movie, I actually think they did a pretty good job and made a pretty good faithful horror comic book movie that, in all honesty, wasn't bad. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad.